The clock on the dashboard of Elena Rivera's beat-up Toyota Corolla glowed 11:42 p.m. as she eased off the gas. Pulling to the side of a deserted street in Hammond, Indiana. The air was frigid, the kind of April night where your breath hangs like smoke. She rubbed her tired eyes. Still gritty from a 10-hour shift at Las Saboras, the little Mexican joint where she slung plates as head cook. The smell of frying oil and dried chilies clung to her like a second skin. Her apron tossed carelessly across the backseat. Next to her, 12-year-old Sophia yawned, her big brown eyes half closed, clutching her backpack like a lifeline. "Mom, how much longer till we're home?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. She'd spent the evening hunched over homework in the restaurant's break room, waiting for Elena to clock out. Elena forced a smile into the rearview mirror. 10 minutes. Mija, close your eyes. I'll wake you when we get there. She knew Sophia needed rest more than anything after a long day at school and hours killing time at the diner. Guilt gnawed at her. Another promise to find a better job. A better life for them. Still unkept. They were scraping by in a cramped one-bedroom in Hammond's Latino district. A place where dreams felt like luxuries. She turned the key, the engine sputtering back to life, and swung onto a quiet side street to dodge the main drag's traffic. Barely 2 minutes in, red and blue lights flared in her mirror. Sharp and relentless, her heart slammed against her ribs. She slowed down, easing the car to the curb, her hands tightening on the wheel. Just a routine stop, she told herself, though a sick feeling churned in her gut. In Hammond, being Latina often meant trouble with the cops, not because you did anything wrong, but because of who you were. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car, their shadows looming under the flickering streetlights. Derek Voss, the taller one, had a buzz-cut and eyes like steel, cold and unblinking. Kyle Brennan, shorter but broad-shouldered, toyed with his flashlight like he was itching for action. They swaggered over, Voss rapping hard on her window with his knuckles. Elena rolled it down, keeping her voice steady. "Good evening, officers. Is something wrong?" Voss tilted his head, smirking like he'd already won some game she didn't know they were playing. "Your left taillight's out. You checked this junker lately? Driving around at night like this?" His tone dripped with sarcasm, probing for a reaction. Elena frowned, racking her brain. "I had it looked at last week, sir. It was fine then." She stayed calm, careful, especially with Sophia right there. Brennan swung his flashlight beam into the car, the glare hitting Sophia square in the face. She flinched, hugging her backpack tighter. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's okay, baby," Elena said fast, resting a hand on Sophia's shoulder. She turned back to Voss. "I've got my registration right here. Let me grab it for you." Voss cut her off, his voice like a blade. "Step out of the car. Now." His hand hovered near his holster, his stare daring her to argue. Elena froze, fear clawing up her chest. "Officer, I'm just taking my daughter home. I haven't done anything wrong." Brennan chuckled, a dry, ugly sound that echoed in the cold. "Just taking her home, huh? Then why'd I smell something funny coming from this car? Get out, or I'll drag you out." Sophia gripped Elena's arm, her eyes welling up. "Mom, don't go. What are they doing? Listen to me, Sophia. Stay put," Elena murmured, fighting to keep her voice from cracking. She opened the door, stepping out with her hands raised, proving she wasn't a threat. The wind whipped her hair wild, but she locked eyes with Voss. "I have a right to know why you're doing this, don't I?" he sneered, closing the gap between them. "Rights? You think you've got rights here? Show me your papers, quick." Elena reached into her jacket pocket, pulling out her wallet with slow, deliberate moves, handing over her license and registration. Voss snatched them, gave them a cursory glance, then tossed them onto the pavement like trash. "Fake papers, I've seen plenty. This car looks like one reported stolen last week." "Explain that. It's my car," Elena snapped, her anger breaking through. "I've got the title, insurance, everything's legal." Brennan yanked open Sophia's door. "Kid, get out. We're searching this thing." "No, leave her alone," Elena shouted, lunging toward her daughter. But Voss grabbed her arm, twisting it hard behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder, though she bit down hard, refusing to cry out. Sophia screamed, thrashing as Brennan hauled her out of the car. Mom, she fumbled with her backpack, pulling out her phone with trembling hands and hitting record. "I'm filming this. You can't do this. Brennan ripped the phone from her grip, hurling it to the ground and stomping it under his boot with a sickening crunch. Filming cops. Huh, kid? That's resisting. He grinned at Voss. Looks like we've got a whole family of troublemakers here. Voss shoved Elena down, her knees slamming into the concrete. He snapped cuffs onto her wrists, tightening them until they cut into her skin. Elena Rivera, you're under arrest for suspected drug possession and resisting an officer. Got anything to say? Drugs? I'm a cook, not a criminal. Elena yelled, tears finally spilling as she saw Brennan holding Sophia by the arm. She's only 12. What are you doing to us? Voss leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. People like you need to learn your place in this town. Don't even think about fighting us. He straightened up, nodding to Brennan. Load them both in the cruiser. It's gonna be a long night. As they dragged her away, Elena caught Sophia's terrified gaze, her little girl sobbing, clutching her backpack like it could save her. A small crowd had gathered a few yards off, an old man shaking his head. A young guy filming from a safe distance. Too scared to step in. Nobody dared challenge the cops in Hammond. The patrol car's siren wailed, tearing through the night as it sped off with Elena and Sophia. Leaving the Corolla abandoned on the curb, fear and fury churned inside Elena. A storm she couldn't unleash alone. Then she thought of Javier, her brother. Javi, the guy she hadn't seen since he left the Navy 2 years back. If anyone could pull her and Sophia out of this nightmare, it was him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elena Rivera stumbled into the Hammond Police Department's holding area. Her wrists raw from the cuffs cutting into her skin. The place stank of bleach and sweat. A brutal concrete box that swallowed hope whole. Derek Voss shoved her forward, his grip bruising her arm, while Kyle Brennan trailed behind, dragging Sophia by her backpack strap. The girl's sobs had quieted to shaky breaths, her big brown eyes darting around like a trapped animal's. Elena's stomach twisted. She'd always told Sophia to trust the police, that they were there to help. Now that lie hung between them, heavy and broken. A bored-looking booking officer, a middle-aged woman with a smoker's rasp, glanced up from her computer. Name, she barked, not bothering to meet Elena's gaze. Elena Rivera, she answered, forcing her voice steady. I'm a cook at Las Saboras. There's been a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Voss snorted, leaning against the counter. Caught her with dope in her car. Resisted arrest. The works. Her kid tried to play hero too. The booking officer sighed, typing without a flicker of interest. Empty your pockets. Elena fumbled with her cuffed hands, placing her keys, a crumpled $5 bill, and her restaurant ID on the scratched metal surface. Brennan stepped up, smirking as he pulled a small plastic baggie from his own pocket, a white powder glinting inside, and dropped it next to her stuff. Well, look at that. Guess we've got a dealer on our hands. Elena's blood ran cold. That's not mine. You planted it. You know you did. Her voice cracked, desperation spilling out. The booking officer shrugged, adding, possession of a controlled substance, to the screen like it was just another Tuesday. Brennan grabbed Sophia's backpack, dumping it out, notebooks, a pencil case, a half-eaten granola bar tumbling onto the floor. Check the kid too, he said, grinning at Elena's glare. Stop it. Elena lunged forward, but Voss yanked her back, slamming her against the wall. Pain flared in her shoulder, and Sophia cried out, Mom, shut up, both of you. Voss growled, nodding to Brennan. Get the kid to holding. We'll deal with her later. They hauled Elena down a dim hallway, past cells crammed with women, most of them Latina, some with bruised faces, others staring blankly at the walls. The air was thick with despair, a stench of unwashed bodies and hopelessness. They shoved her into a cell at the end, already packed with 10 women in a space built for 5. The door clanged shut, the sound ringing in her ears like a gunshot. Inside, a woman with a fading black eye and tired lines etched into her face scooted over on the metal bench. First time? She asked. Voice low. Elena nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I don't belong here. They planted drugs on me, said I resisted. My daughter's out there, alone. The woman, Rosa, she said her name was, gave a bitter smile. Welcome to Hammond PD's special treatment. I'm in for jaywalking, that turned into assaulting an officer when I asked why they stopped me. Been here 2 weeks. No hearing yet. Elena's heart sank. 2 weeks? For what? Rosa leaned closer, whispering. They target us, Latinos. Immigrants. Anyone who can't fight back. Chief Baxter runs this place like his own damn cartel. Plants evidence. Shakes people down. Keeps us quiet. Your girl, she okay? I don't know. Elena choked out, tears burning her eyes. They've got her somewhere in here. She's 12. Rosa squeezed her hand, a small lifeline in the chaos. Someone'll look out for her. Word spreads fast in the barrio. We take care of our own. Elena clung to that shred of hope, picturing Sophia's scared face. Hours crawled by, the cell a blur of muttered curses and restless pacing. Around 2 a.m., Voss swaggered back, his smirk sharp as a blade. Rivera, move it. Chief wants a word. He yanked her out, leading her through a maze of corridors to a small, windowless room that reeked of stale coffee and fear. A single table sat in the middle, 2 chairs facing off like a standoff. Chief Roy Baxter waited there, a hulking man with graying hair and a jaw like granite. He wore a crisp uniform, badge gleaming, but his eyes were predator cold. He tossed a manila folder onto the table and sat, motioning for her to do the same. Elena stood, defiance stiffening her spine despite the ache in her bones. Where's my daughter? She demanded. Baxter's smile didn't reach his eyes. Safe. For now. Child Services picked her up. Standard procedure for a druggy mom like you. His voice was smooth, practiced, like he'd said it 100 times. That's a lie. Elena snapped, her fists clenching. You framed me. You're framing us both. He leaned forward, unfazed. Careful. Rivera. Accusing an officer's a quick way to pile on more charges. You're looking at possession. Resisting. Maybe a stolen vehicle if we dig deeper. He flipped open the folder, revealing a photo of her Toyota with a circled dent. Funny how evidence shows up when we need it. Terror gripped her. What kind of monster could do this so casually? Why me? She whispered. Barely audible. Baxter's gaze hardened. Because you're nobody. Because this town runs my way. And people like you need to stay in line. That's how it works in Hammond. He stood, towering over her. One phone call. Rivera. Make it quick. Voss uncuffed one hand, shoving her toward a wall-mounted payphone. 5 minutes. He barked, stepping back but watching like a hawk. Elena's fingers shook as she punched in a number she hadn't used in years. A secure line Javier had given her back when he was still stateside. Before his last tour with SEAL Team 6. Only call this if it's life or death, he'd said, his voice steady as rock. Tonight, it was. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Her breath caught, praying he'd pick up. Then, a familiar growl cut through the static. Morales. Relief crashed over her like a wave. Javi, it's Elena, she whispered, tears spilling. I need you. They've got me and Sophia. Cops framed me. Took us. Please. A beat of silence. Then his tone shifted, sharp and lethal. Where are you? Hammond PD, she said, glancing at Voss. Chief Roy Baxter's running it. They're gonna bury us. Javi. Another pause. Longer. Colder. When he spoke again, it was steel wrapped in promise. Stay tough. Sis. I'm coming. The line went dead. Elena held the receiver a second longer, drawing strength from her brother's voice. She hung up, turning to face Voss, who'd edged closer, suspicion narrowing his eyes. Who'd you call? Rivera? He asked, voice low and mean. She met his stare, chin up, fear tempered by something new, hope. My family, she said simply, letting the weight of it hang. Baxter stepped back into the room, catching the tail end. Family, huh? Hope they're smart enough to stay out of my town. He jerked his head at Voss. Take her back. We'll see how tough she is by morning. As Voss dragged her away, Elena's mind raced. Javi wasn't just family. He was a ghost in the machine. A SEAL who'd taken down warlords and terrorists half a world away. Baxter didn't know it yet, but he just lit the fuse on his own downfall. 3,000 miles west, Javi Morales stood in a dusty training compound outside San Diego. The Pacific wind cutting through the night. He'd been running drills with a new SEAL unit when his encrypted sat phone buzzed. An emergency line no one used unless hell broke loose. Elena's voice, trembling but fierce, had hit him like a gut punch. Now, his jaw clenched. He stared at the horizon, replaying her words. They've got me and Sophia. Cops framed me. At 38, Javi was a legend in the team's 6 tours. Classified ops that'd never see daylight. Scars mapping his lean frame. He'd left Hammond years ago, swearing never to look back at the town that chewed up their childhood. But Elena stayed, built a life, raised Sophia against the odds. And now some small-time chief thought he could crush them? He stormed into the ops tent, where his old crew, guys he'd bled with, were gearing down. Mia Chen, a tech wizard who'd hacked insurgent networks in Fallujah, looked up from her laptop. Ethan Brooks, a money trail bloodhound who'd traced cartel cash through 3 continents, was cleaning his Glock. "Pack it up," Javi said, his voice low and tight. "We're moving." Hammond, Indiana. "My sister and niece are in deep. Cops framed them. Locked them up." Chief's name is Roy Baxter. Mia's fingers froze over her keyboard. "Framed? Like, planted evidence?" "Exactly," Javi growled. She sounded scared out of her mind. "Sophia's 12, and they've got her too." Ethan holstered his gun, eyes narrowing. "Sounds like a shakedown racket. Small-town PDs don't pull that unless they're dirty top to bottom." Javi nodded, pulling up a map of Hammond on a tablet. "That's what we're gonna find out. I need everything: Baxter's file, his crew, his dirt. We're wheels up in 2 hours." Mia cracked her knuckles, diving into her system. "Give me 30 minutes. I'll have his whole life on a platter: bank accounts, calls, whatever's out there." Ethan grabbed his phone, dialing a contact at the DOJ. "I'll sniff out the money. If he's crooked, there's a trail." Javi paced, his mind already in Hammond, Elena's voice looping, Sophia's safety a live wire in his chest. He'd seen corruption before, taken down worse men than Baxter in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. But this was personal. This was home, twisted into something ugly. "He's got no idea what's coming," Javi muttered, his hands curling into fists. The tent hummed with purpose, his team moving like the well-oiled unit they were. Outside, the night stretched endless, but for Javi, it was already countdown to war. Back in the cell, Elena sat rigid on the bench. Rosa's words echoing, "They target us." The women around her swapped stories. Traffic stops turned into drug busts. Fines they couldn't pay morphing into jail time. It wasn't random. It was a system, a machine built to grind down people like her. But Javi was coming. She clung to that, a lifeline in the dark. She didn't know how he'd do it. Didn't care. All she knew was her brother never broke a promise, and tonight, she'd bet her life on it. Elena Rivera pressed her back against the cold cell wall, the murmur of the other women fading into a dull hum. Her mind was a storm, Sophia's terrified face, Baxter's smug threats, Javi's voice cutting through the phone static. It had been hours since that call. The clock somewhere in the station ticking past 4 a.m. Exhaustion gnawed at her. But fear kept her sharp. Rosa dozed beside her, head slumped, her whispered stories of Hammond PD's brutality still ringing in Elena's ears. Then the cell block door slammed open, jolting everyone awake. Derek Voss stormed in, his face twisted with something new: panic. Maybe. Beneath his usual sneer, "Rivera, up," he barked, grabbing her arm and hauling her out. The other women shrank back, eyes wide, like they knew something big was brewing. He dragged her through the station, past flickering lights and muttering cops, into a back lot where a blacked-out SUV idled, its engine growling low. Kyle Brennan stood by the driver's door, tapping his gun holster nervously. "Move it," Voss snapped, shoving her toward the vehicle. "Where's Sophia?" Elena demanded, planting her feet. Brennan smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll see her soon enough. Get in." Before she could fight, Voss slammed her against the SUV, cuffing her hands behind her back again. Tighter this time. The door swung open, and they forced her inside, the leather seats cold against her skin. Brennan climbed in front, Voss in back with her, and the SUV peeled out, tires screeching on asphalt. "What's this about?" she asked, voice steady despite the dread pooling in her gut. Voss leaned close, his breath sour. "Chief's orders. You're more trouble than you're worth." The ride was silent, tense, the city blurring past dark warehouses, rusted train tracks, the glint of Lake Michigan under a sliver of moon. 20 minutes later, they pulled into an abandoned steel mill, its skeletal frame looming like a ghost of Hammond's past. The SUV rolled to a stop near a loading dock, and Elena's heart sank as she saw another vehicle, a beat-up van with its side door open. Sophia stumbled out, her wrists zip-tied, guided by a hulking figure in tactical gear, face shadowed by a ball cap. "Mom," she cried, voice breaking. Elena surged forward, but Voss yanked her back. "Stay put," he hissed, drawing his gun. Chief Roy Baxter emerged from the mill's entrance, flanked by 2 more men, mercenaries. Judging by their vests and rifles, his uniform was gone, replaced by a dark jacket. But that predator grin stayed glued to his face. "Nice family reunion," Baxter said, strolling over like he owned the night. He stopped a few feet from Elena, hands in his pockets. "You got a big mouth." "Rivera, that call you made?" Stirred up some noise. "Can't have that." Elena glared, fury drowning her fear. "You're a coward, hiding behind guns and lies." He laughed, cold and hollow. "Coward? No. Smart. See, you're a message. Proof this town bends to me. Your kid's collateral." He nodded to the merc holding Sophia, who tightened his grip, making her whimper. "Let her go," Elena shouted, straining against Voss. Baxter's eyes narrowed. "Not yet. First, we tie up loose ends." He turned to the mercenaries. "Take them inside. No witnesses." Before they could move, a low hum cut through the air, a drone. Small and black, buzzing overhead. Baxter squinted up, irritation flashing across his face. "What the hell?" His words died as a flashbang grenade sailed from the shadows. Landing at his feet, it erupted in a blinding burst of light and sound, shattering the night. Elena hit the ground, ears ringing, Voss's grip loosening as he cursed and stumbled. Gunfire cracked, sharp, precise bursts, not from Baxter's men, but from somewhere in the mill's dark corners. The merc holding Sophia dropped, a clean shot through his chest, and she bolted toward Elena, sobbing. "Mom!" Elena scrambled to her, wrapping her arms around her daughter despite the cuffs, shielding her as chaos erupted. Javi. Morales stepped into the fray like a phantom, his silhouette cutting through the smoke. Black tactical gear hugged his frame, a suppressed pistol in one hand, a knife in the other. Behind him, Mia Chen emerged from a rusted stairwell, her drone controller glowing faintly, while Ethan Brooks flanked the right, laying down cover fire with a carbine. Javi's team moved like a machine, years of war honing every step. He locked eyes with Elena for a split second, a nod that said "I'm here," then turned his focus to Baxter's crew. The second merc charged, rifle raised, but Javi closed the gap in 2 strides, driving his knife into the man's throat and dropping him silent. Voss recovered, firing wildly at Javi, who rolled behind a steel beam, bullets sparking off metal. "Who the hell are you?" Voss yelled, voice cracking with fear. Javi didn't answer, just popped out, squeezed off 2 shots, and Voss crumpled, clutching his knee. Baxter bolted for the mill, shouting into a radio, "Back up, now!" Javi pursued, relentless, his boots pounding the concrete. Inside, the mill was a maze of rusted machinery and shadows, the air thick with dust. Baxter darted up a catwalk, aiming his Glock down at Javi. "You're dead, whoever you are," he roared, firing. Javi ducked, the shot ricocheting off a pipe, then sprinted up a parallel stairwell, closing the distance. Outside, Mia's drone zipped low, distracting Brennan as Ethan tackled him, pinning him to the dirt. Sirens wailed in the distance, FBI. Tipped off by Javi's call en route from San Diego. He'd pulled strings, cashed in favors, and now the cavalry was closing in. On the catwalk, Javi caught Baxter, slamming him against a railing. The chief swung a fist, but Javi blocked it, driving an elbow into Baxter's jaw. The gun clattered below, and Baxter staggered, blood trickling from his mouth. "You can't touch me," he spat. "I own this town." Javi grabbed his collar, voice low and lethal. "Not anymore." He hurled Baxter over the edge. The chief's scream cut short as he crashed onto a conveyor belt 20 feet down. Still alive but broken, Javi didn't waste a glance. He raced back to Elena and Sophia, kneeling to cut their restraints with his knife. "You okay?" he asked, his rough hands gentle on Sophia's trembling shoulders. Elena nodded, tears streaming as she pulled him into a hug. "You came, always," he said, voice thick. Headlights flooded the mill as FBI vans screeched in, agents swarming the scene. Special Agent Carla Ortiz, a no-nonsense woman with a clipped Chicago accent, strode over, badge flashing. "Morales, you weren't kidding about this mess." Javi stood, wiping blood from his knife. Told you, Baxter's a cancer. Evidence is all here. Ortiz eyed the chaos, dead mercs. Brennan cuffed and whimpering. Baxter groaning below. We'll take it from here. You're damn lucky I owe you one. Javi smirked faintly, turning to Elena. Let's get you two home. The steel mill's chaos faded into an eerie quiet as the FBI van's engines hummed, their headlights carving sharp lines through the dust. Elena Rivera sat on a rusted crate. Sofia curled against her side. The girl's zip tie marks still red on her wrists. Javi Morales stood a few feet away, wiping sweat and grime from his face. His tactical gear streaked with dirt from the fight. Special Agent Carla Ortiz barked orders to her team, her voice cutting through the night as they cuffed Kyle Brennan and hauled a groaning Roy Baxter onto a stretcher. The chief's leg was twisted at a sick angle, his empire crumbling faster than he'd fallen. Elena watched it all, her chest tight with a mix of relief and rage. She'd survived, Sofia had survived, but the cost still burned. Javi crouched in front of them, his dark eyes softening. You two holding up? Sofia nodded, her voice small. You're like a superhero. Tio Javi. He chuckled, ruffling her hair. Just a guy who doesn't like bullies. Kiddo. Elena gripped his hand, her voice thick. I didn't know if you'd make it in time. Thank you. He squeezed back, steady as ever. Told you I'd come. No one messes with my family. Agent Ortiz approached, her clipboard tucked under one arm. Morales, your intel was gold. We've got enough here to bury Baxter and his crew. Planted evidence. Extortion. Ties to a smuggling ring out of Gary. Brennan's already singing. Trying to cut a deal. Javi nodded, glancing at the cuffed cop being shoved into a van. What about the mercs? Hired muscle. Ortiz said. Ex-Blackwater types. We'll trace the money. But Baxter's the head of this snake. Elena stood, pulling Sofia with her, her legs shaky but her spine straight. What happens now? To us? Ortiz's gaze softened, rare for a Fed with her rep. You're free to go. We've got your statements, the footage from Morales's team, plus a dozen witnesses from the barrio who've come forward since this hit the fan. You're safe. Elena exhaled, the weight lifting just enough to breathe. Safe, she echoed, tasting the word. It didn't erase the night, but it was a start. Javi slung an arm around her shoulders. Come on, let's get you home. Shower, food, sleep, in that order. Sofia managed a faint smile. Can we get tacos? He grinned. Kid after my own heart. 2 weeks later, the Hammond courthouse buzzed with a restless crowd, locals packing the gallery. News crews jockeying for shots outside. Elena sat in the witness box, her hands folded tight, recounting the night that nearly broke her. They stopped me for nothing, she said, voice clear despite the tremble. Planted drugs, took my daughter, threatened us. It wasn't just me, there's a whole community they've terrorized. The jury, half Latino, a small miracle in this town, leaned in, faces grim. Across the room, Derek Voss and Kyle Brennan slumped in orange jumpsuits, their lawyers scribbling notes. Baxter, still in a wheelchair from his fall, stared daggers from a holding cell feed. His trial split off for the feds to chew on later. Brennan cracked first, spilling everything, years of shakedowns, fake busts. Baxter's cut of drug cash funneled through shell companies. Voss stayed silent, his jaw locked, but the evidence piled up like a landslide. Bodycam footage Mia had hacked. Bank records Ethan traced. Testimonies from Rosa and a dozen others who'd been locked away on lies. The verdict came fast. Guilty on all counts for Voss and Brennan. Abuse of power. Evidence tampering. Conspiracy. Voss got 20 years. Brennan 15 with his plea. Baxter's federal case loomed, promising decades more. Cheers erupted in the gallery. A wave of relief crashing through the Latino families who'd lived under Hammond PD's thumb too long. Elena stepped out of the courthouse. Sofia at her side. Javi a quiet shadow behind them. Reporters swarmed, mics thrusting forward. Ms. Rivera, what's next for you? One shouted. She took a breath, the answer rising unbidden. Fighting back. This doesn't end here. That fight took shape over months. Elena poured her savings, and a chunk of Javi's, into the Rivera Rights Coalition. A scrappy nonprofit born in the ashes of that night. They set up shop in a storefront off Calumet Avenue. Walls plastered with flyers and photos of the barrio's faces. She hired Rosa as her right hand. The ex-cellmate's fire matching her own. They offered legal aid, pushed for cop reforms, rallied families to speak out. Javi stuck around, trading his SEAL fatigues for a desk, at least part-time, training volunteers and digging into cold cases of police abuse. Thought I'd retire after this, he told Elena one night over beers at Las Saboras. The restaurant now hers after the owner sold cheap. But you've got me hooked. She smirked. Family curse. Can't quit a good fight. The coalition's first win came 6 months later, a civilian review board for Hammond PD. Forced through after protests and a petition with 5,000 signatures. Elena stood at the city hall steps. Sophia beside her, reading the announcement to a cheering crowd. This is for everyone who's been silenced, she said, voice carrying over the noise. We're not invisible anymore. Cameras flashed, but her eyes found Javi's in the back. He gave a nod. Pride flickering in his stoic face. Later, at home, Sophia taped the news clipping to their fridge. Her smile brighter than it had been in months. Think we'll be okay now, Mom? Elena pulled her close, feeling the scars of that night but also the strength it forged. Yeah, mija, we're gonna be more than okay. Across town, in a federal lockup, Baxter watched the same news on a grainy TV. His hands cuffed to a wheelchair. The empire he'd built, gone. Torn down by a single mom and her brother he'd dismissed as nobodies. The guard flipped the channel. And Baxter snarled, powerless. Justice didn't just win, it rebuilt.